Tanakwe, Talofa, and good morning to you people of the internet. Welcome to Right in the Childhood. On this part of the show, I look at a children's TV show or movie, whether it's from the 1990s or the 2010s, and either give it the praise it deserves or send it to the fiery pits of hell where it belongs.
The humble cartoon. We finally come to the happiest part of many of our childhoods. We grew up with cartoons, and cartoons grew up with us, and they've become a staple favourite of children, teenagers, and adults alike. And for a select few, no matter how old they get, they still manage to entertain us today. And that is most definitely the case with Rugrats.
One of the first Nicktoons after Nickelodeon switched to creating unique content, Rugrats was a quaint cartoon about a gang of babies going on adventures in their own backyard, which brought a baby's eye view to the world. They had a pretty good run for a cartoon, starting in 1991 before ending in 2004. But what made it such a hit? Is it still a classic today? All will be answered.
So, Rugrats followed a gang of babies, and there were four in the group to start with. There was Tommy, voiced by E.G. Daly. There was Chucky, voiced by the now sadly deceased Christine Chavona. And there was Phil and Lil, voiced by Kath Susie. The four often find themselves in odd situations, whether by themselves or generally in their little gang. Whether through overactive imagination or misinterpretation of the adults' words, it always leads to some kind of adventure for them. This is all the while having to face down bullying by the evil Angelica, played by Cheryl Chase. It's a pretty interesting concept and a really good premise. However, what makes a good premise is its execution, and of course when done poorly, it can really bite you in the ass. H2O. Gladly, however, it seems to be the case that it is a really well executed premise. Every single episode that I've seen has put one or all of the children into a very interesting and original situation, whether it be about growing up or just anything that's going on in their lives in general. They can make something that would seem quite boring to an adult and make it quite fun and creative. And that is amazing. Oh, there's no massive interconnecting story arc compared with other shows, but with some connections in some of the movies, which I'll get to at a later date, the individual stories on their own are really quite interesting. One episode I particularly remember was called Toys in the Attic. Tommy and Angelica are dropped off at Tommy's maternal grandparents' house, while the parents are off to watch a game. The grandparents are actually quite interesting characters, them being practicing Jews. I'll get back to the story in a moment, but it is actually quite interesting to see religious characters played like this. You never really get to see religion or religious people portrayed in cartoons that much. Unless you're on the receiving end of, yes, another of the unoriginal comedy about religion from South Park or from Family Guy. Rugrats actually released 2 episodes around Jewish, and in one case, Judeo-Christian belief. 2 episodes featured Hanukkah and Passover, with the Passover episode telling the story of the Passover. It was a really, really good episode, and it received praise from so many critics and from religious groups as well. Sorry for my little digression, let's get back on track. As the parents go off to their football game, with Dee Dee worrying the home isn't childproof, Tommy and Angelica immediately find themselves in trouble, almost causing major damage to everything in the living room. Aw, kids do the darndest things, don't they? After Boris and Minka finally deal with everything, they try to figure out how to deal with the kids. They finally decide to take a nap, and Boris goes up to the attic to grab a crib. However, this is when Angelica begins to taunt Tommy with the threat of ghosts. Okay, I have one little question about the show that I really need an answer to. I'm sure many fans are asking too. How is it that the adults don't understand understand the babies when they're talking? Is it kind of like a World War II movie where Germans speak English, but when they've got an Englishman in the room, they start speaking German? But instead with German, it's baby talk? I don't know, maybe I'm thinking too much, but anyway, Boris accidentally falls over and a ball comes jumping down the stairs, and they realise what's really in the attic.
Toys!
Ah, hence the title. So they all settle down to their nap, and Angelica reveals she was only lying to Tommy. She breaks him out of the crib, and they decide to go up to the attic and try and grab the toys. The kids finally get to the attic, and it's an absolute treasure trove. Old clothes, photos and all. Their search for the toys appears to be fruitless at first, but after crashing into a huge stack of boxes full of toys, they soon fill with joy. That is, until the lights go off. Now this is one part of Rugrats that I love. Being able to twist something so ordinary into something that would be so scary from the point of view of a child. Just the environment of it all, the darkness, the puppets, the eerie shadows of it all. It's fantastic, and it does make your hair stand on end. Yeah, it's not as big as some of the other massive imagination changes that come with some other episodes of Rugrats, but they still do it quite well. Even though we realise it's not really the forces of the supernatural at work, we still really get to see the children's perspective of things. The record, the ghost. The whole situation is finally resolved when Minka comes up, switches on the lights, and Boris takes off the sheet. And then there's this huge reminiscing party.
My old dressmaker's dummy. Oh, look how thin I was.
Wait, have you never been up there? Lady, how long have you been living in this house for? How would you not know that your old dressmaking dummy was up there? Ugh, old people. But everything is all smiles as they reminisce with the kids.
There's a truck to drive through the fence, Mr. Grandpa Boris.
Well, you see, darling, I did not drive through the fence!
The parents come back home quite happy, and both Angelica and Tommy are quite happy. And end episode. It is a really fun episode. I wouldn't classify it as one of my favourites, but it is a really good episode, and I would say check it out if you get the chance. And of course, I can't really not talk about the opening trope. So, of course, when the episodes begin, there's this huge close-up of something going on. Many images were portrayed in this trope, however, some of them weren't exactly child-appropriate, when you think about it as an adult. I won't repeat any of the Nostalgia Critics jokes, but there was one he particularly cited. There was actually something that was actually Spike the dog's tongue, but you could interpret it as... Yeah, I'll leave that to you guys. As the show started to get older, they introduced some new characters as well. After the first movie, they introduced Dill, Tommy's new little brother. And then after in Rugrats in Paris, they introduced Kimmy, Chucky's new stepsister. Everything with Chucky's new stepsister and his new stepmother was actually quite an interesting dilemma to create for him. And they actually did an episode that does kind of deal with it, by the name of Finsterella. After the babies hear the story of Cinderella, Chucky begins to develop fears that Kira will turn out to be just like the wicked stepmother in the story, and that Kimmy will just be like the wicked stepsister. She is starting to act quite weird too, copying Angelica's every single move and every single word. Chucky soon hears that there's going to be a party, and apparently he wasn't told about it. This is when he starts to think that maybe the story is finally starting to come true for him. This isn't helped by the fact that Kira is rehearsing for a play and she's spouting lines about cleaning that would sound just like the wicked stepmother. Chucky soon's fallen into a fantasy where he begins to believe that he is Finsterella, Angelica and Kimmy are his evil stepsisters, Phil and Lil are Hansel and Gretel.
You're even more lost than you think, 'cause you're in the wrong story.
Yeah, wrong story, guys. And Tommy is the fairy Bob brother. Nice creative way, if you ask me. The whole thing ends with Tommy reminding Chucky that if he could stop his dad marrying Coco LaBouche in Rugrats in Paris, he can save himself from Kira too. He gets his outfit on and he plans to hide in the garage, planning to sneak along to the party in the car. With the kids all in the playpen, they all begin to turn on Kimmy for her behaviour, starting to believe Chucky's story. But then they realise Kimmy was just playing a game. Oh, of course. Of course, sweet little Kimmy couldn't do such a horrid thing to her big brother, could she?
Think about it too much, too much, too much, too much.
Comes to Chucky's aid as he's crying in the garage, thinking that he's missed the party. And the parents announce that they've officially adopted the children, and they're now officially a family. It's not as deep or as adult as some other episodes are, but it is still quite an interesting dilemma to think about how Chucky takes having a new family member, or in this case two. If you're looking for a deeper episode, I would also check out their Mother's Day special, which actually checks out Chucky's lack of a mother, and it actually does a really interesting spin. It's definitely worth checking out, but be warned, it will make you cry. The cartoon isn't always about tackling big topics, but it is good that they're able to stretch out of their comfort zone and be able to speak about things like this. And they've done it twice in the two Rugrats movies. The show had a pretty good run. However, after it ended, what happened? In 2003, they began a spin-off of the show, with the entire gang now as teenagers at high school. And it had a 5-year run until 2008. It wasn't as well received as the original, but it was still quite good. There was also a very short-lived spin-off called Preschool Days. How short-lived? Well, wouldn't you guess? 3 days. Yes, people, 3 days. Man, that is really one bad way to screw up. This show is still remembered as one of Nickelodeon's jewels in its crown. Can't really find any flaws in the series. However, it's not entirely perfect, and anyone who saw the Wild Thornberrys crossover with the Rugrats can definitely agree with that point. But with that in mind, this show, a first in Brighten the Childhood history, gets a perfect 10 out of 10. But those were my own thoughts. What did you think of the show? Let's have a chat down below in the comments. Well, that's another childhood over. So, until next time guys, goodbye, harera.